The views and opinions expressed on the following program are those of the host and guests and do not necessarily represent those of any organization, including One Generation Away.
The freedom of a people to choose its leaders is the root of liberty.
Keep alive this experiment in liberty.
Liberty, in case you've forgotten, is the soul's right to breathe.
Government should be very minimal in protecting liberty.
Peace cannot be purchased at the cost of liberty.
The sturdy ground of liberty.
Liberty once lost is lost forever.
Fight for their liberty and for our security.
Guarantees individual liberty.
This great republic, born alone in liberty.
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 Liberty. Liberty.
Just how much do you want liberty?
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner,
a production of LibertyNation.com.
cutting through the double talk, taking on the topics, going after what the politicians really mean, and making it all clear. For your freedom and your liberty. Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
A show trial, vaccination nation, a governor on the spit, and why leftists believe they can't have nice things. We'll cover the waterfront today on Liberty Nation Radio, a production of LibertyNation.com and heard from coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I'm Tim Donner, senior political analyst for LibertyNation.com, and today we'll discuss Democrats spending the week trying to convict Donald Trump, how vaccines are sweeping the land as the heavy burden of the pandemic lightens, at least for now. Plus, the growing movement to kick California Governor Gavin Newsom out of office, as we're joined by Pennel Bird of LibertyNation.com, covering the story from his home base in L.A., and how it is, even in the face of spectacular good fortune and full control of the federal government, leftists just can't seem to be happy. And LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor, constitutional lawyer Scott Cosenza joins us for Talkin' Liberty.
Say what? Say what? Say what? One more time.
We kick things off with our signature segment, Say What, where we roll out a virtual assembly line of wacky, astonishing, damnable, and ultimately revealing things uttered by politicians in the chattering class. As Democrats tried for a second bite at the Trump impeachment apple, they managed to convince 5 Republican senators to put their stamp of approval on the whole proceeding, but not to actually convict the 45th president, because an unattainable 67 votes would be required for the left to get what they want, which is the verdict that Trump will never again be allowed to run for office. No, this was all designed as a show trial, just like during the first impeachment. But it was notable that a 6th Republican decided to support the trial, even though Trump's already gone from the White House. Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy.
I said I'd be an impartial juror. Anyone listening to those arguments, the House managers were focused, they were organized, they relied upon both precedent, the Constitution, and legal scholars. They made a compelling argument. President Trump's team were disorganized. They did everything they could but to talk about the question at hand. And when they talked about it, they kind of glided over it, almost as if they were embarrassed of their arguments. Now, if I'm an impartial juror, and one side's doing a great job, and the other side's doing a terrible job on the issue at hand, as an impartial juror, I'm going to vote for the side that did the good job.
So remember that name, Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, added to those of Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania, Ben Sasse of Nebraska, and the expected trio of Susan Collins, Maine, Lisa Murkowski, Alaska, and, of course, Mitt Romney of Utah. We shall see how those votes go over with the 74 million people who voted for Trump in November. But there's no doubt the impeachment presentation in the Senate by lead House Manager Jamie Raskin was power-packed. He described the moment he heard a sound on the day of the Capitol siege, sitting in his office with his kids.
The sound of pounding on the door like a battering ram. The most haunting sound I ever heard, and I will never forget it. The kids hiding under the desk, placing what they thought were their final texts and whispered phone calls to say their goodbyes. Watching someone use an American flagpole, with the flag still on it, to spear and pummel one of our police officers ruthlessly, mercilessly. People died that day. 2 officers have taken their own lives.
That was just part of a high-intensity presentation by Jamie Raskin, but it doesn't speak to the issue of incitement by former President Trump on whether he's to be held responsible for the actions of that mob of insurrectionists. Meanwhile, with over 1 million people being vaccinated for COVID every day and cases falling in over 80% of the nation and flat in the rest of the country, it was somewhat surprising to see the Biden Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, float and then hem and haw about the idea of requiring COVID tests for airline passengers, which the CEO of Delta Airlines, Ed Bastian, says is exactly the wrong thing to do at the wrong time.
The CDC is looking at all its options, but, there's got to be common sense, medicine, science really driving this.
I think it'd be a horrible idea for a lot of reasons. First and foremost, we're carrying as a U.S. industry over 1 million people a day on average, and that number is starting to grow again, which we'd like to see. Travel domestically in the air transportation system is the safest form of transportation. I think we all know that. Incidence of spread aboard any of our planes is absolutely minimal, and it's hard to get tests. There's days of delay still. I think it would be a logistical nightmare and would set the not just the transportation and travel industry back, but the whole hospitality sector, the hotels. It set us back at least probably another year in the recovery.
And speaking of the recovery, how long will it be before it's safe to go back in the water, so to speak? How long, oh Lord, before we can rid ourselves of those godforsaken masks? Anthony Fauci says it's all about getting as many people vaccinated as possible.
If we can get, and I have used this as an estimate, it's not definitive, that if we can get 70 to 85% of our population vaccinated and get to what we would hope would be to a degree of herd immunity, which really is an umbrella or a veil of protection against the community, where the level of virus is so low, it's not a threat at all, then at that point you could start thinking in terms of not having to have uniform wearing of masks.
Fauci's guesstimate is that we can probably go about our lives mask-free by about November. But while the news on the coronavirus continues to be encouraging as of this hour, the new president has started to deal with the fallout from some of his earliest actions, foremost among them the shutdown of construction of the Keystone Pipeline and the many jobs created by it on his first day in office. And head of the huge AFL-CIO, Richard Trumka, tried his best not to attack Biden too hard about the impact on his union.
I wish he hadn't done that on the first day, because the Laborers International was right. It did and will cost us jobs in the process.
Do you think Biden realizes that that was a mistake, that announcement?
I think so, yes.
Biden continues to get pushback on his Keystone Pipeline decision for many quarters, as he did almost right away on his statement about China this week, trying to separate himself from his predecessor as much as possible.
We need not have a conflict, but there's going to be an extreme competition. And I'm not going to do it the way that he knows this, because he's been sending signals as well, that I'm not going to do it the way Trump did. We're going to focus on international rules of the road.
That means the return of what I like to call the new old world order, where China is viewed by Biden and his administration as essentially a constructive rather than destructive force around the world. And the Republican senator from Arkansas, Tom Cotton, says, well, at least Biden is trying to sound a little tougher on China.
Look, it was a year ago this week that I started demanding investigations into the labs in Wuhan and whether they could have been the source for the plague that China unleashed on the world. You know, the media at the time hyperventilated that I was spouting conspiracy theories. Now they're admitting it's plausible and it needs to be investigated. Meanwhile, a year later, we're still dealing with the fallout here in America. Our schools are closed and kids are not getting educated, in no small part because of Chinese communist malevolence and negligence.
Indeed, Biden will have to prove that he's got a different view of and policy toward the Chinese communist rulers than when he said months ago that they're good people. And now that Biden is in and Trump is out, how's the view from the people who held power under the last president? Trump Chief of Staff Mark Meadows says the difference is as stark as can be.
We see a Biden administration that's very active, but not on behalf of the American people. It's on behalf of special interests. We've seen it with all these executive orders. And not only are they prepared with executive orders that were probably written by special interest lobbyists, but they're going against the very heart of America. It's going against energy. It's going against our immigration policy. We also see the Biden administration coupling up with Iran, getting applause from the foreign minister of Iran for actions that they're taking there. I can tell you it is not about America first. It's about America last. And we need to make sure that we fight back on behalf of the American people.
But first things first, Republicans have to decide who we is. 6 Republicans are fine with impeaching Trump after he left office, and many others have made noises about separating themselves from the former president as the GOP spirals downward, desperately seeking their post-Trump identity. Quick break, and then we're back to discuss how even a run of incredible good fortune has failed to make the left happy. Far from it. Do leftists believe they just can't have nice things?
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Stay ahead of the curve with LibertyNation.com. With one click, Liberty Nation delivers tomorrow's news.
And remember, liberty.
Today.
All the time and everywhere.
With LNTV's Hot Topics and Analysis.
You're looking at people just rising up.
Liberty Nation Radio, The Uprising and Rabbit Hole podcasts, and dozens of insightful original articles. And now, you can keep your kids ahead of the curve with LNGenZ.com. LN Gen Z brings a free-thinking education right into your home for students of every grade level with articles, videos, worksheets, and ready-to-go curricula. While the media establishment giants are sleeping, you can stay ahead of the curve with LibertyNation.com and get tomorrow's news today. Liberty Nation and LNGenZ.com.
We believe that all men are entitled to blessings of liberty.
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
So imagine you just won the lottery. Not the big prize of, say, $10 million, but let's say a cool $5 million. Would you celebrate the incredible luck involved in winning unforeseen riches? Or would you lament that you didn't win the supersized ultimate prize? Well, the answer on the left is apparently the latter. Rewind to almost exactly 1 year ago. The man you hate with a passion unseen before, even in the low-down, dirty game of politics, is set to inflict 4 more years of himself on the nation. He's running on record-low unemployment, persistently impressive economic growth, energy independence, new and improved trade deals, standing tough against China, and, oh yeah, peace. That too. And then, as if it was a gift to the left directly from whatever heaven they believe in, and Jane Fonda even said so, a pandemic overtakes the nation, throwing a monkey wrench directly into the roaring economic engine and life itself. The deaths of tens of thousands of people justifies a shutdown across the land, a virtual national airdrop of unsolicited mail-in ballots, and widespread liberalization of voting laws, resulting in unheard of turnout. It allows you to keep under wraps the somnambulistic relic you begrudgingly settled on to run against this reviled president. It throws what looked like an almost certain Trump victory into political purgatory and ultimate defeat. You've experienced luck on a scale that should have even atheists on their knees in thanksgiving, and you have slayed the dragon. But wait, that's not all. Down 50 seats to 48 in the Senate, the equivalent of being down 2 runs in the bottom of the ninth. You eke out 2 last-minute victories in Georgia, of all places, more than 60 days after the national election, and presto, you control the White House and all of Congress. But we're not done. A rogue band of Trumpists presents you with another gift of manna-like value, breaching the Capitol and laying in a fat pitch for you to hit out of the park. It empowers your media wing to depict Trump as every bit the odious force in politics they've been describing in vivid detail for these many years. It would validate the wisdom shown by voters in removing Trump from office before he can wreak further havoc on the land. Yes, leftists achieved every one of their goals and so much more, which they set heading into the fateful year of 2020, taking down Trump, disgracing his supporters, winning the Senate, scoring a trifecta they had to believe was almost impossible before the pandemic. And yet they're still not happy, not satisfied even. Is it possible they simply refuse to be content, even for a moment? Or are they actually incapable of satisfaction, not to mention joy? Or do they somehow believe they're just not allowed to have nice things? Any group of people not given to perpetual doom and gloom would celebrate their incredible good fortune and newfound control of their beloved swamp and present to the nation a glowing vision of the future, an America built back better. They could pull out the tried and true, like how they are humbled by the trust the voters have apparently placed in them and all that. Instead, they fire up the censorship machine, call for a forcible removal of 2 senators who had the audacity to raise their voices in support of auditing the election. And they forge ahead this week with the most backward-looking of all initiatives, putting on trial with a flagrantly partisan left-wing judge, a president who no longer holds the job, even as they know they will surely fail to convict him. They could be grateful and celebrate these leftists. Instead, they complain and signal their dubious virtue. It is a testament to the mindset of the progressive left circa 2021 that all their wishes came true on Christmas Day, and yet they walk away angry and disappointed, like it all amounted to a glorified lump of coal. Quick break, and then we're back to talk about a movement growing serious steam, the effort to recall California Governor Gavin Newsom.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Far more important than my political future and far more important than yours, the well-being of our country.
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
There's a conflagration brewing in the largest state in the nation. California Governor Gavin Newsom has been widely criticized for his heavy-handed response to the pandemic, particularly with angry parents across the state demanding that their kids be let back into public schools. And now there's a serious effort underway to kick Newsom right out of office through a recall effort, which appears to be gaining steam. Joining us to discuss is our man on the ground in L.A., LibertyNation.com's own Pennel Bird, who's been writing extensively about the pandemic and the vaccine and how it's all played out in the Golden State. Pennel, welcome back. It's been too long.
Good morning, Tim. It's great to be here, and we're here to discuss one of my favorite subjects, the good Gavin Newsom, our governor.
Well, first off, let's get to the basics. Who's running the recall effort? How many signatures are needed for a recall to make it onto the ballot? And how close do you believe the recall organizers are to reaching that goal? And also explain to us how it would work from there if they do get enough signatures.
Right. Well, this was a grassroots conservative effort from the start, but it's gained so much steam and there's so much antipathy for the governor at this point that even some Democrats are starting to jump on board. They need 1.5 million signatures by March 17th. Last word is that by February 10th, they had 1.4. Those signatures do have to be verified, Tim. And once they're verified, there could be a recall election as early as, middle of the summer. And on that ballot, they will voters will just very simple ballot. They'll be either approve or reject. If they approve, then they are approving the recall, but they're also effectively voting for the person that gets the highest number of votes on the same ballot. And that person will replace Governor Gavin Newsom as the governor of California.
Now, you've written a lot on LibertyNation.com about the COVID vaccines, including their reliability, but also the situation in California, which is hardly boosting Governor Newsom's popularity. What's the problem with vaccinations in the nation's largest state? Newsom up to this point has sort of shirked any questions about the recall, and he's pivoted to always discussing the vaccine rollout. The state of California has blamed the federal government, I assume that's the previous administration, for an insufficient supply. But the Fed has shipped and delivered 4.7 million doses of the vaccines. The problem is that California to date has only been able to administer 1.8 million of those 4.7. And a lot of that has to do with just the bureaucracy of it, Tim. There's a lot of vaccines that are sitting in freezers. And recently, I think the state acknowledged that the rollout has been incredibly slow, the slowest in the country, they're saying, and that they need to take measures. So they recently announced that Blue Shield would take over to coordinate delivery statewide and speed up the process. Now, Pennel, you and I have our own points of view on the beliefs and governance of Gavin Newsom, but what about rank and file Californians who don't pay attention to politics like we do? Give us a sense, as best you can, of the pulse on the ground regarding this governor and the things he's done that led to this recall effort.
Well, look, he's a very charismatic politician. He's highly photogenic. He's one of the favorites in the Democratic Party to eventually take the White House. So those things certainly work in his favor. He had, Tim, he had over 60% support for his governorship and the way he was running the pandemic back in September. That has fallen to 46%. So now a majority of people in California disapprove of the job that the governor's doing. And I'm not going to lie to you, he's made some missteps. I think what really, this recall effort, and there have been plenty of them, but this one really got the wind beneath its wings in November when the governor was caught at a fancy Napa Valley restaurant called French Laundry. I mean, it's one of the most expensive restaurants in the country. He was there with 11 other people. And, in the before times, as I call them, that would in no way be shocking. But Newsom had mandated lockdowns, social distancing, masking, He had closed small businesses and restaurants across the state. And here he was enjoying, basically flouting all of his own rules at this incredibly expensive restaurant. So it was a black eye. It was not a good look. And he, right after that, the recall effort really sort of, I call it Frankensteined back to life, because it had stalled. And those poor optics for the governor really got the electorate upset. A lot of people were experiencing, privation and not being able to leave their homes. And here was the governor sort of, flouting his own laws. And by the way, Tim, it looked to be that he was breaking his own rule that he set for Thanksgiving, which was to wear a mask between bites. And he definitely wasn't doing that at the French Laundry.
Of course, I think in that he probably was in concurrence with about 99.9999% of Californians and people across the country. But, Pennel, California is almost synonymous in the eyes of the nation with recalls and referenda, propositions ranging from property taxes to consumer protection. How is the precedent set by the successful recall effort of a previous governor, Gray Davis, likely to impact this recall effort?
It's a good question. I think having had Gray Davis lose in a recall as recently as 2003 makes it alarmingly real for Gavin Newsom. I mean, it's really a cautionary tale writ large. There are some differences. There's some similarities. They're both Democratic governors. They're facing possible recall. Gray Davis was incredibly unpopular at the time. He had like a 70% disapproval rate. Again, Newsom's is at 46%, so there's a gap there. However, he needs to take it seriously. I think he's been in a lot of interviews throughout the end of the year and throughout January, sort of avoiding it in that way that kids block their ears and kind of rock and say something to avoid the truth. He needs to take it seriously now. Even a Democratic consultant named Alex Acosta said that he needs to really start taking this seriously and put together a recall committee. I don't know if he's done that at this juncture, but if he hasn't, he probably should, because they're closing in on this 1.5 million signatures.
So, Pennel, if Newsom is successfully recalled, could the GOP put up any candidate better than Arnold Schwarzenegger, who replaced Gray Davis and turned out to be a big disappointment to Republicans?
Yeah, Schwarzenegger was obviously a marquee choice for governor. It was, hugely novel to have such a big movie star running the state. Of course, Ronald Reagan had been the governor of California very successfully, and he was a big movie star as well. But you're right in saying that Arnold Schwarzenegger turned out to be conservative in the way I think most people feel, Supreme Court Justice John Roberts is, which is to say, not very. In lieu of, I would tell you this: there are two guys who've come out of the gate already and declared in case of a recall. One is John Cox. He already ran for governor and lost, so you could say at least he has that experience. He's very a passionate guy. He was, I think, a Trump supporter. He's come out early. In fact, he's already made some TV ads bashing another Republican who has declared, who's Kevin Faulconer. He was the previous or former mayor of San Diego, and Cox's ad is trying to smear him as corrupted in the same way that Newsom is. So he's sort of tied those two guys together. So it's already, even before they've collected the signatures, it's already becoming a serious race and hotly contested.
Well, Pennel, if if this recall effort succeeds, we'll certainly have you back as soon as the verdict is in to discuss what happens next in the wild and woolly state of California, from whence Pennel Bird comes. Thanks for joining us.
My great pleasure, Tim.
Pennel Bird, LibertyNation.com.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Stay ahead of the curve with LibertyNation.com. With one click, Liberty Nation delivers tomorrow's news.
And remember, Liberty.
Today.
All the time and everywhere.
With LNTV's hot topics and analysis.
You're looking at people just rising up.
Liberty Nation Radio, The Uprising and Rabbit Hole podcasts, and dozens of insightful original articles. And now, you can keep your kids ahead of the curve with LNGenZ.com. LN Gen Z brings a free-thinking education right into your home for students of every grade level with articles, videos, worksheets, and ready-to-go curricula. While the media establishment giants are sleeping, you can stay ahead of the curve with LibertyNation.com and get tomorrow's news today. Liberty Nation and LNGenZ.com.
And now we have reached the portion of Liberty Nation Radio which we entitle Talkin' Liberty, as we welcome back in our regular contributor, constitutional lawyer, LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor, and the man who we prefer to call our guardian of individual liberty. I got through that in record time. Scott David Cosenza joins us again, so let's get into the impeachment trial of a president who's no longer president.
And a trial, Tim, which is not a trial, as a matter of fact.
It's not a trial. I mean, again, I hate to keep beating a dead horse, Scott, but we need to keep reminding people that an impeachment is not like a legal trial. It's strictly a political matter.
Yeah, this trial in the Senate is just what the Senate allows these House members to make of it. So let's remember that it's members of the House that are presenting in the Senate. I was almost going to say presenting facts, but that's not entirely accurate either. Some of the things they're presenting are facts, and some of them are just assertions, which is one of the main things that makes this activity different from a trial, Tim. And trial is the presentation of evidence. And so what concerns much of the activities in a trial are the verification of that evidence. You don't just post a tweet that says that we would have killed Nancy Pelosi if we got our hands on her, and then that serves as somehow evidence of an intent perhaps to kill Nancy Pelosi. That's the kind of thing that we're seeing in the well of the Senate, and it does not resemble in any way, thankfully, what happens in a real trial.
Well, we saw the lead House impeachment manager, Jamie Raskin, get extremely emotional, appeal to people's raw fear, I think, of what happened in the Capitol, describing it in incredible detail. But I fail to sort of understand where the fact of the specific incitement by Donald Trump came into this, because if you look at the speech beforehand, Scott, which we've all done, I've done it more than once, there are no words of incitement in there.
Let's just take that for a second, if you would, the first part of what you said, that Jamie Raskin was incredibly emotional. I don't mean to laugh at his emotion. Clearly, he was overcome. I think, well, I don't know that it's clear. It seems to me that he was overcome by genuine emotion. He had just lost his son, I believe, by suicide immediately prior to this whole sort of series taking effect. But, you would never have, Tim, in a real trial, for instance, you wouldn't have, let's say, if the Las Vegas mass murderer Hatfield went to trial instead of killing himself, right? You wouldn't have a prosecutor of him, couldn't have been a person who attended that concert and got shot at. So the fact that Mr. Raskin is one of the victims of this insurrection, right? And then he's going to go and be a prosecutor essentially of the president. Again, just another thing that would never happen in an actual court. These tears aren't evidence. They never get to the proof stage where it's just, it's just this deluge of horrible event after horrible event, with the idea is that, somebody should have to pay for this. Who's going to have to pay? Well, there's one obvious answer, Tim, and it's Donald J. Trump.
It seems to me, Scott, that the biggest difference between a legal trial and a political trial, and what we really would call a show trial here, is that, well, let me put it in the form of a question. Do you know any prosecutor who in his right mind would bring charges, bring a case that they know almost for certain that they're going to lose? You ever see that happen?
No. The prosecutors are duty bound not to bring cases they don't have sufficient evidence to convict on.
Okay, let's move to an actual legal matter, Scott, in an actual court of law, not a star chamber in the Senate run by a Trump-hating left-wing senator. The First Circuit Court of Appeals has upheld border searches of phones and laptops.
This is a big deal, Tim. This says that border agents can turn on your devices and look through them, so your phones and your laptops, and that they do not need a warrant to do so, that the crossing of the international border gives them the legal right to do this under our Constitution. I think it's a controversial decision as far as I'm concerned. There are a few places, Tim, where you have fewer rights than at an international border crossing as an American when you come into the country. And this just reduces those rights even more. The articulation that we have to surrender our devices for inspection to any border agent who asks, it's a blow to liberty. It says that they have to get permission from a supervisor if they want to keep the device past the time that you're actually at the border, so they can hold on to it for a while you're there. But if you're going to leave, they have to get a supervisor's permission to hold it. And then they have to have another supervisory review if they want to hold it after 15 days. But you can imagine the imposition of having your cell phone or device out of your possession for 2 weeks while they decide if they want to do something about it. The plaintiffs that brought this case were largely people with Muslim surnames who travel to that area, to Middle Eastern or Muslim countries as well. They're Americans, though, and they want to be able to leave and enter this country without being searched, as it would seem like their rights would require, absent some kind of suspicion that they've done anything wrong. But we're all going to have to pay the price now, which is that any of us who cross an international border are subject to this type of search.
Staying in the federal judicial system, a federal appeals court has revived Florida's red light camera challenge.
Tim, I always like to hold the red light camera operators' feet to the fire, because they try to expose or rather exploit the law to the denigration of the citizenry and to enrich their own pocketbook. And they often violate the law when they do so in coordination with local authorities who are just after that dough. And I think it's disgusting. And so that's why I often focus on it. And it's these little things that add up that, what are you going to do about it? It's a $7.90 fraud that this company, they changed their names to avoid being associated with their own guilty past. American Traffic Solutions, or ATS, has changed its name to Vera Mobility. And they're the ones that stole $7.90 to like over 1 million Floridians.
Okay, thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Tim.
Scott Cosenza, legal affairs editor at LibertyNation.com. This program, Liberty Nation Radio and LibertyNation.com's own podcasts, The Uprising, hosted by Scott, and The Rabbit Hole, Politics and Prose, all available on demand at LibertyNation.com and from fine podcast providers everywhere. So that is it for this week, but we will be back at you next week. Same time, same station. Till then, this is Tim Donner saying stand up for liberty. And we'll see you next time on Liberty Nation Radio.